What's up, everybody? We're back on the channel. I'm McSnazzi and we're playing Planet Zoo again today. We're back in Timber Gorge and we're going to do probably the biggest sort of project we've done so far in this zoo. And it's going to be a bison and pronghorn antelope exhibit. Now, to really make an exhibit for these two animals, it's going to be very plain. The bison don't really like a lot of anything. Necessarily not a foliage, and if you want to make it look realistic, it needs to be very barren because bison live in the plains. Buffalo don't really like a lot of, they don't live in forests, they don't graze in forests, they eat the grass, etc. Pronghorns kind of do a little bit of everything. I think they live a little bit in like the mountainous regions. So we're going to do a little bit of a mix here. We're going to add a lot more height variance, which I've been trying to do since our park's been super flat so far. So what we're going to do is we're going to make this huge bison exhibit. Initially it was just going to be bison, but I realized the pronghorn can actually enrich the bison by being in the same exhibit together, because if you check the Zoopedia you can see these sorts of things, because I was having issues with the amount of males that I had in the buffalo herd, and I figured it out via the Zoopedia, so I ought to check that more before I do more exhibits, because it has a lot of good information. But then I saw, we can throw pronghorns in here, so we threw pronghorns in here because it was a huge exhibit anyway. And I wanted to make a really big area for these buffalo, because I've seen them in real life and they have a big amount of areas and they have big herds. So it just makes sense. But having a big open space, which they like, is just, it's not fun. So what we're doing on screen, and you've been watching me do it, we're making this big mountain backdrop, this like nice Yosemite looking like cliff mountain with a bunch of trees on it. That just is a beautiful sightline for the park. And this is sort of going to be the boundary this way, I'm thinking, because we've gone a lot left and right in this park. We haven't really gone forward, and there's a ton of space forward, so we're gonna try and move more forward, more towards the back of the park now instead of to the sides, because there's just a ton of space that way, and that's how it's gonna work out. And we're sort of getting to the border over this way, and there's no point in continuing this way. So I wanted to build this big mountain. It's sort of like, hey, it was a natural thing when they built the zoo, it was there. So this is a border to the park, this is the big exhibit this way, and this is going to sort of start our North American area, which I've been talking about, splitting all of our animals into different areas. This is going to start the North American one. Bison are inherently North American, inherently American animal. I've seen them in person, living in the Midwest, and they're huge, they're majestic, they have these big herds, and they're just awesome. I've seen them at the zoo many times, and they really just have these boring exhibits, because they really just like wide open space that they can graze on. That's it. They're kind of like cows in that sense. So I wanted to spice it up, because you're not gonna make a very pretty habitat for them if you just make it wide open like that. So what I do is we build this big mountain on the side, and I think it looks really beautiful. We also have the sort of delta of our Timber Gorge River sort of go out into this exhibit, and the bison actually drink from it, so it's pretty cool. So it's a nice little area. I'm really happy with how it turned out. I think this is the best terrain work I've done in this game to date. And we're getting better every episode. The park's just coming together really well, and we're just gonna keep moving forward and keep expanding. And I was sort of hitting like creative block here, like wondering what I wanted to do next. I've done 2 episodes of the Asian area. I didn't want to necessarily continue more into there, because we need to kind of put some other animals in. So I'm like, you know what? Let's go over here. Let's do something North American. I didn't know I was gonna do bison, but then I built this really cool mountain. I'm like, you know what? We'll just put them in here, because it's a huge wide open space, and this is like definitely gonna be the biggest exhibit in the park by far, because it is huge. We have so much space here. So hopefully they they breed and make a huge herd, and it can be awesome. And then the pronghorns can also have a lot of space as well because there's so much space. But I haven't really talked about what we're doing on camera here. I'm sure you can tell. We're building the cliff face of the mountain, so I kind of wanted this feel of Yosemite sort of mountain. I don't know if you've seen pictures of Yosemite. It's like cliffy, lots of trees. A nice technique to do when you're doing these, which I figured out while doing it, is make a bunch of little flat areas, like tiered up, and you can put trees on these flat areas and rocks on the side, and it just looks so natural and cool. Looks like it's building up. And then the trees help block a lot of the boring terrain work, so you don't have to put like a billion rocks on the mountain to make it look realistic, because that's a little unreasonable. And you're not necessarily going to be staring at this all day anyway. So the trees cover up a lot of the places where I don't have rock work, because if I did rock work for this whole mountain, it would be the whole video, because it would have taken me forever. And I wanted to show a lot of my techniques that I'm using on this mountain, because I feel like making these huge, like, natural looking landmarks in the game isn't an easy thing. So I wanted to give you guys some tips on how you could make it without having, you don't have to be super skilled to make these in the game. All you have to do is really cover up a lot of the boring parts with trees. Like, look here, I'm putting the trees down, but I'm sticking them really far in the ground so they don't look too huge, but they look great. Look at this. We have like 3 different tiers, and we're just copy and pasting this like rock and making it fit along the cliffs, so it looks like it's like a steep cliff. And then there's trees behind it. That's all you really need to do, because when you're looking as far away as we will be, or as the guests will be, you're not going to see the little bushes and foliage. So you don't have to put a lot of those little bushes and the nettles and the ferns and everything. Really, you just have to put the trees in and make it look natural, make it look good. At the end of the day, we want stuff to look good, and I really like how this turned out. I'm really impressed with myself. I was really surprised I was able to do this. I've seen a lot of Planet Zoo YouTubers making some crazy mountains, crazy like terrain work. I didn't think I could, but I think this turned out really well, and I think we can do more of this in the future, because I really wanted to make a cool looking bison exhibit and not make it just like a field, because that's super boring. We want the zoo to look good, but they have so much area, as you can see as I'm doing the outline of this habitat. It's huge. They have just so much area, but I think it just looks great. It's going to be the biggest exhibit. I'll let it run for a little bit, and I'll jump back in when we do something new. Alright, we're back in. I guess I can sort of talk about the fence selection here. I think it's important. I went for the electric fence. I think it looks cool. Definitely looks like the type of fence you'd have for like a herd animal. So that's why I kind of went for it. It looks really cool. But you kind of need it. You'll see in a second. The buffalo actually break through it because I didn't have any electricity going on the fence. And it makes me put these transformers around so we can actually put electricity on the fence, which was a pain in the butt. But there's been rumors that we're going to get an update soon for Sandbox where we can turn off things like electricity, etc. So I don't have to have those ugly transformers. You'll see where I put one. It's right by the entrance because I have to have it cover the whole area of fence because they're just going to break out if I don't, because they do hit it. Let me talk a little bit about this. So apparently the bison could swim, and they could swim all the way upstream unless I put something here. So I thought a good idea to sort of stop them from swimming all the way upstream is just making a little bit of a beaver dam. So we just took a lot of different dead trees and just laid them down and then put some water effects around them. And I think it turned out great, and apparently they can't swim through it. So it worked out for its purpose, and it's pretty, so I'm really happy with it. We're gonna put in some of these enrichment items now for the bison. They have quite a bit, and it really helps fill up the bland area that they have. And here's a little tip I saw from another YouTuber, Geekism. He put the rubbing posts into the rocks, so they hit the rocks and there's him breaking the fence. So I realized I need to put electricity on this fence. So here I go doing that. But yeah, they put the rubbing post enrichment item into the rocks, so the bison actually go up to the rocks and rub on the rocks, and it looks pretty cool. So I couldn't really figure out where to put this transformer, so we end up just having to put it right there by the entrance to the exhibit, which I'm not a fan of. It's gonna change. We're gonna do something about that for sure. Here I'm going changing the food quality on the exhibits because I realized, hey, you can actually do that when I was looking at the bison exhibit. So maybe that'll help enrichment too. Some things I hope in this update we'll be able to turn off a lot of stuff in Sandbox. I want to turn off, if we could turn off them pooping, because the bison, you'll see, they just poop so much, and the keepers don't go in and clean it up. And the keepers don't really feed the animals that often either. They kind of just feed them monthly or something, but it's just always empty when you look at it, and it makes me mad because I just want to get like nice shots of them eating or see them with like a bunch of food. So I hope they change that, or you can just have like in Sandbox mode have the food always be in there. The animals don't necessarily have to eat it all the time, but I want to be able to see the food constantly. I think it would look really good. But we're going to add a little more foliage by those rocks. We're going to remove that later because you can't really see it. The textures kind of go out when you're looking because the exhibit's so big. If you're looking from the point of the guests along that little path that we built there, the raised path, you cannot see those bushes with full textures. So I take them out because it's just unnecessary. And that's really the issue. I wanted to add a little bit more foliage up by the mountain there, but the buffalo really only like 4 types of foliage, like North American grassland. There's not very many North American grassland plants. And with that being said, you can't really see the foliage because the exhibit's so big, because we have the big mountain backdrop and then the big field for the buffalo. So the textures kind of go out and we can't really see it, so we take it out. As you saw there, I built a little barn. This is where they're gonna sleep at night. So the buffalo, even though they don't necessarily need bedding or hard shelter because they are sort of like cattle, they don't really need a barn. They can sleep out in the middle of the field, and they're allowed to. But I wanted to have a little bit of an area. It is a zoo. They need somewhere to go to get away from the guests if they get stressed. And I think the pronghorns like a little bit of a hard shelter area, so it works out in the end because we end up putting pronghorns in here, sort of an improvisation. But here we go. We need to add some more staff stuff over here because there's just so much going on. This is such a big exhibit, and the bison kept getting hurt or unhealthy. They kept getting diseased or injured somehow, and they needed food. They needed checkups. It was just a lot. So I always thought instead of the staff running from all the way across the zoo, we'll just put a little staff area here, and I think it looks great. We put a little fence around it, add every essential building, kind of like with the staff center, and we spice it up with a little bit of tree work so it looks wooded and out of the way, so guests aren't necessarily looking at it. And I think it's a nice little backstage area for this because it's going to be one of the bigger exhibits. It's going to have probably the most animals out of any exhibit, other than the flamingos because they're just breeding like crazy. But the flamingos are so small. I feel like the bison need a little more work. It makes sense having a lot of staff stuff close to them because they're going to have such a big herd. The pronghorns are also going to be here, and it's just such a big exhibit, so the keepers have to walk like a far amount to just feed them. They have to walk like in, and it takes them a little bit to get to the middle to those feeders to feed them. And I end up moving the closest feeder and move it a little more towards the guests because the guests are saying they don't really get a good view. But I mean, how aren't you getting a good view? You're like getting the perfect view. But whatever, that's just another thing in this game that the guests complain about. But it's sandbox, it doesn't really matter. We're just trying to make a nice looking exhibit at the end of the day, and I really like how it looks. So here we're gonna be moving and making a little bit of a fence here. I cut out a lot of the fence making because it goes forever. It goes all the way around this whole thing, but we're just gonna use the custom, sort of a custom fence. We're gonna use the fence they have in game, and then we're gonna put a little thing on the side so it looks a little more custom. I didn't want to go for a big huge custom fence along this because it's just such a large area and it would be so many pieces. And here we go, we're gonna make the sign. This is probably my favorite sign that we've made so far in this park. I know we've only made like 2 signs, and the orangutan one was pretty underwhelming. That was sort of an afterthought, and we'll probably go back and change that orangutan sign at some point as I'm getting better at making them. But I really like this sign to this exhibit. You're gonna see us make the bison sign here first, and then afterward we're gonna add the pronghorn sign next to it, and they both just look super cool. Nice little entrance. We put one on both sides because, as you sort of notice, we have this sort of rock structure, well, sort of hill in the middle, and then entrances on 2 sides. Sort of you enter one way and then you'll go around and exit the other. That's sort of what I was going for here, but I didn't know what I was gonna put in this middle area right there between, and I put the little bit of rocks, or the little bit of a hill, just some more height variance. And there's the pronghorn sign. Oh, the pronghorn sign just looks great. I love how that looks. I know it says pronghorn right now, but it's gonna say pronghorn in a second. But I cut out a ton of this work. We do a bunch of foliage work on this middle area, a bunch of rock work in this little area, but we'll jump into the real-time walk around in first person in a second, and we'll show you all the work that we did within there. Alright, here we are at the beginning of the park, and we're gonna go towards the bison and pronghorn exhibit. It's gonna be all the way over on that side, and you can already see the mountain sort of. Look at the just hill changes. I think it looks great, the height variance, because you can see it when you're that far away. And we're gonna fill in this area in future episodes. I'm not quite sure what we're gonna put in each. I'm sure we're gonna put an exhibit house and some more animals, but look at, there's the sign. I love how that turned out on this side. The trees, it just looks natural, and it's like climbing up those rocks. It just looks so cool. I'm so happy with that sign. Here we see some bison over there. Here's the one end of the exhibit, and there it is. There's the nice view of the mountain with all the trees, all that custom terrain work, put in all the trees, you know. Something you guys can do. It wasn't that big of a thing to do. I think it's a very reasonable thing if you use the techniques that I was talking about. But we do a lot of rock and foliage work here in the middle. Keep that dense forest style that we have, but this is a little more mountainous over here by the bison exhibit. But look at them, they're just running around, and they have tons of space, so we can have a huge herd, and I think it works because they're just such big animals. I'm really happy with how this turned out. It looks so good. And it's a great end to this side of the park. We're sort of setting boundaries for ourselves now so we can move towards the back of the park, and I think it's good. And there's the staff area. We're going to fill out all those areas beyond, and there's still some work to do on this bison exhibit, like that barn needs a little bit more spicing up, but we already had so much footage for this video I didn't want to do more. So here we'll go down and look at the staff area. We sort of did a little bit of rock and tree work like usual, making it look good. Just basic buildings, because no one's going to see this. And it's just there for really functionality. so that the staff can go in and help the bison or the pronghorns. But here we're looking, and I just love the sights of that mountain. It looks so good. Oh, I think they're doing a little bit of a mating. That's their mating animation there, so we should expect some bison babies here soon, as they're gonna glitch through each other. But look at that. I love the terrain work we did. It's simple, and you just do a lot of terrain painting too. Not a ton of foliage, not a ton of like little ferns and bushes, but just a lot of trees and rocks. It looks super good, super natural. And here's one of the pronghorns. He's just gonna sit up on this rock. That's a nice shot right there. I might take a screenshot of this. Yeah, that looks so good. It's just natural. It's just what they like. It's what the animals like, and I think this turned out great. And it looks like we're nearing the end of the video here. I want to thank you all for sticking around and watching. I hope you all have a happy Thanksgiving if you live in the US. This video is going to come out on that day, I believe. Please like, subscribe, and comment below if you have anything to say. I really appreciate all the support you guys are giving me. And stay tuned on the channel for the next video. Thank you everybody, and I will see you next time.